we imagine that he had a traumatic experience in the First War. One of the consequences of that being that he withdrew to the walls of his own house in Saint-Malo. He became terrified of the outside world, developed a neurosis, in fact, which prevented him from ever leaving the house. And it is partly his relationship with Marie, the character of Marie, that encourages him to begin anew and to actually step outside, physically step outside his house, but also emotionally step outside of his the trap that he's built for himself, the trap of fear and neurosis that he's built for himself. And that's a very touching, I find a very touching element of the story, that she sort of awakens him from this awful, I mean, it's a slight sort of Beauty and the Beast thing, isn't it? He's sort of trapped in this castle, and she is the one who sort of lures him out into the light, so to speak. He's
an interesting guy. I think he's a widower. I think he's raising this girl on his own, which is probably not common at that time period. He's devoted to her. He's a layman kind of scientist himself. He's kind of a jack of all trades. He's a wonderful craftsman, and he's a thinker, and he's there's something kind of spiritual about him in his own way, as a kind of mystical kind of person. His relationship with Marie is really, really beautiful. They really are deeply entwined to one another. They live their lives so closely together. They're each other's companions in a lot of ways. And he's dedicated to her, and she, in her own way, is dedicated to him. He's dedicated to her greatness, and he sees something great in her. And he's the kind of, parent that we all, or caregiver that we all want, that just thinks you're the best in the world. And that's how he sees Marie.
It so happens that something in his voice or his attitude or the information he imparts in his monologues, in his broadcasts, actually touches a great many people, more than he could possibly have realized. And maybe it's his physical entrapment that allows him mentally, intellectually, to free himself. He has no other outlet. He doesn't jog. He has no dog to walk. He has no other outlet for his energies besides his intellect and his desire to communicate that and the observations he's made to an unseen audience, which may consist of 10 people or 10,000 or 10 million. He has no way of knowing. Because that was radio then. Radio then, I mean, shortwave radio was the internet before the internet.
No more coffee, Uncle Etienne. I'm finishing up.
No, this is for me. And it's brandy.
So he first builds a model for her in Paris, and then he builds one here, and there are 2 scale replicas of each town. And they really only need to be, and he builds them for her to be able to learn how to get around the city, so she could be free. So she has the potential to live as freely as any sighted person. And he builds them in entirety. He would really only have to build the streets for her to learn the streets, but he painstakingly builds it to scale and to detail. And therefore she gets what would be a non-sighted person's image of the world in detail around her. And that's really a loving contribution to her that he makes.
He says the most important light is a light you cannot see.
What does that mean?
Well, if you hadn't interrupted me, I would have found out.
The legend of the Sea of Flames is that it's cursed. And whoever holds it cannot die, but the downside of that is everyone they love is cursed and left with misfortune. And so, because Daniel is the keeper of the precious stones at the museum, I guess it's presumed that he's the keeper of the Sea of Flames, and therefore his wife dies tragically and his daughter becomes blind. And even though he's a man of science and doesn't want to believe these things, you know, it still haunts him that maybe this misfortune that he has had in his life is because of his being cavalier about the stone. This jewel that he has, the Sea of Flames, is being pursued by what he believes is the entire Third Reich. It's the kind of jewel that interests madmen, like those who rule the Reich, is what he says. And he has brought it to his family home, trying to hide it, and quickly realizes that he's probably going to bring the worst of the Nazis here.
The light you get from a piece of coal is actually sunlight.
Aria has been a revelation. You know, we met a few times before we even got here, and you know, I could see how nervous and afraid she was. She'd never done anything like this, and it's just been great spending time with her and being as helpful as I could to her leading up to this, and then just seeing her fly. I think of her first few days when I was here, and listening to her and listening to Shawn, and you know, hearing what was happening and trying to, you know, help in any way that I could, and then just to see her slowly find her confidence in her place. And really, she's a revelation. I mean, she is really a fantastic actor, and she'll have a long career. I mean, she's spectacular, and I'm a little jealous because it took me 30 years to be able to do what she showed up and did in 2 weeks.
Aria, of course, is absolutely astounding. I mean, astounding, because when they were setting out to cast this, you know, and they had to make a list of the particular characteristics of this role, they must at some point have thought, actually, this might not be doable. We might not find anybody who can encompass this extraordinary range of characteristics. But they did find, I think they may have found the only one who could do it, and she is absolutely astounding, furiously bright, very, very nimble, mentally nimble, physically nimble. Almost like a sprite, you know, she moves with such a sort of lightness and grace, and speaks with such a lightness as well. Obviously very, very quick-witted, courageous, indomitable, I would say.
Hugh Laurie, I love. He's the perfect Etienne, and he's so soulful, and I love working with him because he's right there with you. He's in the moment and spontaneous and just lovely and beautiful. The camera loves him, and his character Etienne that he's made is just really watchable, interesting.
Mark Ruffalo has the most wonderful quality of intelligent warmth. It's not sentimental. It's warmth that comes from it's warmth that comes from a brain. You know, you just get this wonderful feeling of intelligent warmth. I've said that twice now, so that'll have to go on the poster. But he is, I think, perfectly embodies exactly what I imagine Shawn was looking for in Marie's father, Daniel LeBlanc. Determined at all costs to take care of his daughter, to protect her.
What do you say when you speak?
I say, isn't the world a beautiful place?
Well, Shawn is another reason why I wanted to do this. And I was really, I got to work with Shawn a couple times now, but on the Adam project, we worked together, and there was, some really kind of emotional, heartfelt stuff in that. And, I noticed that Shawn had a penchant for that kind of thing, and actually a love for it, and a hunger to do that sort of thing. And so I was really excited to work with him on this and see him actually do a whole movie about that. And those connections, those familial connections.
He's extremely acute, and he is a man of great taste and great energy and great passion, and it's a joy to see him in command of this enormous project. I really enjoyed working with him. I didn't know him before. I met him on Zoom, and although I'd admired his work, we had not met. But it's been a real pleasure to see him steer this thing across the ocean.
He's done an amazing job. I mean, working with Aria, first timer, creating a space for her to feel safe and welcome, and be able to give her enough guidance that is really specific. And I just actually seen him blossom as this kind of dramatic director, alongside with her blossoming as this, newcomer dramatic actor. And yeah, that's been really exciting. And watching, Shawn knows the language of film so well, and he can move very easily and adeptly between kind of genres. That's what I felt, and that's what I see happening here.
Yes, there we are. How on earth are you going to measure out the entire city?
One step at a time.
I suppose overall, the whole idea of the story is that reality is what we make inside our heads. It's not necessarily confined to what we see and touch and feel. It is something that we can absorb and process and create inside our own heads. We can create our own universe inside our heads. What we see through these things is such a tiny fraction of what is there. Literally true in terms of the electromagnetic spectrum. The visible light is a tiny, tiny sliver of what is actually there. And that's such a beautiful metaphor for a way of thinking of life and reality and all sorts of precious things that we are all looking for in life. But sometimes they are constructible inside our own head or communicable from brain to brain rather than through the world. So all the light we cannot see is actually it's a very profound notion, I think. And I would hope that profound notion that underlies the whole story is the thing that people will absorb and take comfort from in a way. I find it a very comforting and beautiful idea.
The novel's so beautiful and moving and human. The thing about the novel is that it's really about kind of the decency of humanity in general, even under this oppressive, absolute totalitarian system. There's still the spark of humanity alive in some folks, probably more than we would ever be able to comprehend. And so that, the novel captures that beautifully. And the script, that humanity still bleeds through, that same message. That you have Werner, who's really, a sensitive, caring human being who's just in this awful, system and predicament. And you start to understand what the idea of the good German is, and maybe how many people were actually fighting in some way, some quiet way, against it.
The first and most obvious thing is that they will root for and become utterly engaged with Marie's survival, first of all, but also her journey into womanhood against incredible odds, a world war being not the least of them. To root for her survival, but also to root for her opposite number, as it were, on the German side, the character of Werner, to see them find common cause and to find a connection is, I think that's probably the most immediate emotional sustenance that people will take from it.